Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I am Fahima Mohammed, your host and your relationship coach for tonight. I want to wish you all a very warm welcome from all of us here on British Muslim TV, wherever you're streaming, whether it's live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. We really do welcome you and your support, you tuning in and watching. And obviously, if you have any questions, queries for myself or my guest tonight, you're more than welcome to call in live into the studio and ask any questions on 01924231083. Please do ask the bill payer's permission as standard network rates do apply. We also have our free WhatsApp service. So if you want to send in any sort of questions and queries anonymously and I can read that out, that number is 07585835150. I have a very special guest with me tonight, and I'm really looking forward to his conversation because it's about the idea of mixed culture and background challenges, as well as being a revert. And he's extremely extraordinary only because of all the different aspects around him. And I really admire his work and also his stance on speaking up, even though he's recently come into the religion of Islam. I want to welcome Andre Murillo all the way from Argentina at the moment. Assalamu alaikum, Andre.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me on.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I was so looking forward to this conversation, and especially you giving us your time. I know you're thousands of miles away and doing so much work, but actually to give us your time is really, really valuable. I admire your work, and there's so much that I actually do feel that you're quite inspiring in the way you speak and you're really open. But before I say anything more, I would love for you to introduce yourself and what you do and just tell the audience a little bit about you.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for your time as well. So my name is Andre. I currently reside in Miami, Florida, but I'm in Argentina right now. I'm a revert. It's been about going to be 2 years now that I officially converted. And I started practicing Islam actually a year prior before that. So I had a whole year of a lot of learning, practicing, learning, how to pray and all the different things that come, with Islam. So once I converted, it actually when I moved to Miami, Florida, and that's when ever since then my journey has been everlasting knowledge seeking. So that's pretty much it. I come from a Latino background. I'm half Argentinian, half Ecuadorian. That mix alone you don't really see that often, and add in me converting to Islam, it's like something completely unheard of. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was thinking. It's so interesting and fascinating, your story and your background. And especially coming from those areas, you have a typical sort of stereotype of how the culture is very open, very Western. And, someone like yourself, especially, quite, young, who would actually turn to this. So tell me, like, what was it that actually made you revert, and what was the influence or role models? Tell me about that because I'm really intrigued.
Well, so I grew up Catholic. I started asking a lot of questions. I started asking a lot of questions that I didn't really get like the greatest answers to. So I started researching myself. At around the same exact time, my brother had converted to Islam. So naturally, I started looking into it. I started asking him questions while I would question all the other faiths as well. And it just seemed the most logical. I always got solid answers. And like I said, just logic, and that's what led me closer and closer to Islam. And the more I read into it, the more I fell in love with it. And that's literally how my journey started. And ever since I converted, I learned so much more. Watching debates, watching different lectures, reading different things, different PDFs, different books, so many different avenues that I started learning about the faith. And then it just, like I said, I'm still learning so much, but I've even from the day that I converted till now, I've learned so much, within that short time span.
Amazing. Now, I know everyone's experience is very different, but I'm really interested in yours because at the end of the day, was it a lonely journey? Because as much as you might be inspired and, open up to a new sort of way of thinking and believing, you will get a difference in response, whether it's family, friends, colleagues. outsiders, generally the Muslim community as well? I mean, is there even a Muslim community where you are? And if so, how were you received by all these different types of people? I'd be quite interested to know more about that.
Yeah, so it definitely was not a lonely journey. Alhamdulillah, like my brother converting alone, that's already, I'm so close to my brother. So that alone right there is someone that I already have that's teaching me. And I grew up around a lot of Muslims, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they were like an influence in me converting, but all of a sudden me, looking into Islam and then reaching out to them and asking them, to help, to teach, you know what I'm saying? It actually brought me closer to them, and I built really close friendships and relationships with them after the fact. And I had known them for longer periods of time already, and this brought me even closer. Alhamdulillah, the same day that I converted, my father converted as well. So it was never, I never felt alone. I never felt like I was by myself. I never felt like it was a struggle. I always had so much support. And even my family, like a lot of my family who isn't Muslim, a lot of them, actually were like, oh, very, very supportive of my decision. So I can't say that it was ever a lonely journey. And to answer the second part of the question, if there's a lot of Muslims where I'm at, I'm originally from New Jersey, and it was just so many Muslims around me, so many Muslims. And then when I moved to Miami, obviously I knew, way less people. I only knew, very few people out there. But when I started going to the masjid, I started seeing how many, Muslims there were. And the masjid I go to is, it's a beautiful, huge masjid, and it just gets filled, you know what I'm saying? Like for Juma, and then, spending Ramadan there, I really got to see how many Muslims there were in Miami. And it seems to be growing more and more and more every time. You know what I mean? So like it's incredible to see that everywhere you go, you always find a Muslim community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's lovely to hear, actually, because I wasn't aware of that at all. So it's quite interesting. When it comes to your culture, everyone has a different culture. And obviously, being Cuban and or Latino, whatever it may be, with regards to all your mixed culture and background, we have so many different backgrounds and cultures as well within the Muslim community. Depending where you come from, whether it's the Middle East, even North Africa or wherever it may be, there is a cultural sort of like essence to being Muslim, and I think as much as it shouldn't, but it does influence your practice. You actually find that too, or do you find the similarities within your culture, or talking to Muslims, did that not matter once you were Muslim? How was that? Because when you have relationships, it's not just romantic relationships, it's also relationships with friends, and you connect through the similarities of culture and background. So I know you come from a very mixed culture and background, but was this an addition, or was there some sort of similarities that you did find?
I could definitely say that it was a little bit of both. And what I mean by that is, clearly being on the West, there's a lot of things that go against, Islamic culture. So, the clear differences right there alone were like, the things that kind of separated me, like, okay, this is totally different from what I grew up, being used to. But at the same time, I would say, me being, Latino and coming from, a Latino background, especially the older generation, my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, they lived by a lot of the same principles as Islam, because they also grew up very religious, Catholic, and a lot of people don't know a lot of the same values, a lot of the same, rules that go into, the Abrahamic religions are very, very similar. So in that aspect, I started seeing the similarities of, the older generation, my grandparents and my parents, and how they lived. And I'm like, wow, that's very similar to what this teaches right here. So I literally got to see both aspects of it. I got to see the differences, the clear differences, especially being on the West and in this day and age. And then I got to see the similarities, that the values and the principles that were instilled in me as a kid from, my parents, my grandparents, also being in Islam.
When it comes to dating and relationships, we can do things old school, and it can also be very similar to maybe some of the old principles that you're talking about. But in today's day and age, did you find very much differences in how people go around with romantic relationships within, your original culture and background, and then how you needed to adjust when it comes to the Islamic faith?
Absolutely. It's gotten different. Every single year it gets more and more and more different. Um, Obviously, me, like I said, growing up in the West, just dating, is very common. Um, you see it all the time, everywhere. Every school you go to, you see, teenagers dating. You see grown people dating, and it's very, very normal. And once I started, learning about the Islamic faith and learning, how the different values and the rules that goes along with dating, it's totally different, of course. You know what I mean? It's not common. It's not common within Muslim communities to be dating, and I've noticed that. But it's like I said, I had to look at the Islamic faith, and I had to assess it and process it and understand the reason why. So when they tell me, for example, oh, you're not allowed to date in Islam, I was like, okay. So I started looking at the reasons why, and it does all make sense. So again, I had to once I processed the reasoning behind it, I understand 100%, and I got to see obviously the clear differences because again, I grew up from a total different mindset of okay, you have a girlfriend, and even your parents and your grandparents being on the West, being like they embrace it. They're like, oh, so do you have a girlfriend? Do you have when's your girlfriend? When you bring your girlfriend? And it's very common. You think you grow up with this common thought that you think it's supposed to be like this. This is the way it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to go get a girlfriend and then bring her home, and that's just the way it is. And growing up like that, and then coming into Islam, sometimes, because I said there's going to be family members. There was family members who understood it, and there was family members that were like, "Well, why? I don't
Well,
understand
Andre,
why."
we're gonna come back to you in a moment because we do have a break coming up, and I think what you said is really interesting. So we're gonna come back and revisit what you said, but we are coming on to a very short break, and have Andre with us for the rest of the episode. So please do stay tuned as we are going to be talking more about Revert's mixed culture and background challenges, and hopefully may be able to resonate with what's being said tonight. So if you have any questions, please share your story or ask any questions, and I'll be happy to put that forward to my guest tonight. But please do stay tuned as we will be back after this very short break. And I look forward to seeing you in a few moments where we will be continuing our discussion. And inshallah, we will see you shortly. Make sure you don't go away as we have a lot more to discuss with Andre. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Having a really interesting discussion with an absolutely exceptional and very inspirational man tonight, all the way from Argentina, and who's talking about all the mixed culture and background that he is coming from already. And on top of that, reverting to Islam. And how is it when it comes to relationships, cultural differences, and trying to practice the faith. And obviously it's a life-changing moment which a lot of us do take for granted, but it is a journey, and it takes sometimes a long time to adjust and to change habits and learn and observe and practice at the same time. Now, Andre, what are some of the criticisms that you can sort of raise? Because we want to learn, we want to understand, even especially like born Muslims, when people do come into the faith, there's a huge expectation. There sometimes can be a lot of judgment as well as to what you're doing, what you're not doing. What would be your advice? What would be some of the experiences, even if you haven't experienced it yourself, because you've had maybe some positive sort of feedback and responses, but I'm sure you've known of, some of the judgments and criticism. So could you highlight that for us, please?
Absolutely. Like you said, I've had some extremely positive experiences, but there is a judgment that comes. You being a revert, it automatically there's going to be a certain group of people who are going to judge you. I've gotten judged so much from before Islam, me having my tattoos, piercings. I've gotten judged in every single way possible, and I still do to this day. On TikTok, I always have comments. I would
Yes.
say, it would be helpful to understand that different cultures, it takes time to really get a full grasp on the understanding of what you're supposed to be doing. And it's a culture shift. Like you have to readapt. You have to unlearn what you learn and then learn again. So it's just patience. It's having patience with, reverts, because you also don't want to push them away. Because I've got, so many reverts that reached out to me and said, how did you deal with being judged about X, Y, and Z? And it just takes time. It takes patience. Like, just have patience with the reverts and, guide them, help guide them.
Well, you seem to be quite level-headed and patient and understanding, and even having the compassion for being judged. But I know there's a lot of people that might actually, find it very difficult to go through the religion. And I know you're being very kind, but I'm not. So I'm going to say it out loud that actually the Muslims who are born and, feel that they need to judge, just stop and think for a moment, because actually we're not here to do that. We're here to just feel, the compassion and the empathy, and actually go through the journey and get to know that person, because you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know their story. You don't know where they're at. So yeah, you've been very polite. But anyway, that's something I just had to get in there. But I do appreciate the fact that, you're so understanding, and the fact that you give support to other reverts as well. I think that's absolutely so, it's so much to admire. And that's why you're here tonight, because I love what you do. I admire you outside your work. It's just even your personality and your character. And I think, that for me is telling in itself as to why you have come to this faith, because it was like, you were chosen. It was meant for you because you already had it. Okay, that's how I feel. Sometimes it's not about, having the label of being a Muslim. Like even our prophet, peace be upon him, he was known as someone who was trustworthy before he even became a prophet, because he had all of those qualities beforehand. And when I hear your story, it kind of reminds me of something similar, to the fact that you already embodied so many of the sort of, amazing sort of like personalities that people need to adhere to, whether they're Muslim or not. You've already got that in you. So it was just the next journey and the next step. So I really want to sort of like, acknowledge that. And I think it's really important that we do. The other thing I want to ask about is, what's your observation of the Muslim community when it comes to relationships, and how do you sort of see it as an outsider, going through some sort of like way of understanding, like how do they basically have relationships, and how do they rush into it, and look at it as they have to go into it because it's half their deen, without actually considering what it means to be in a relationship. And maybe that's the reason why we're having so much divorce and problems today as well. So what's your observation so far about that?
Yeah, I definitely see the exact same thing. I see a lot of rushing into relationships on both ends, from the women's part and from, the men's part as well. There is a rush to being in a relationship. I understand the reasoning behind that, obviously, but again, it's there's so much to consider before going into this. Like, your plan is to spend the rest of your life with this person, to create a family with this person, to, build with this person, for you to be better, to help each other be better. And just to rush into it without having any knowledge about this person, not knowing anything about them, because I've seen it happen a lot of times. Like, I've seen so many situations where they just rush right into it. You know what I mean? And just take your time. I know, again, I can't speak because I come from a different background. I've dated before, before Islam, and it's different because I'm speaking from a different experience. But with that experience, I can say that you just need to take your time and really, really be sure, because what's the point if you want to just rush into it and then you don't know who this person is, and then you end up being divorced, and then it's just a repetitive cycle. So definitely, again, part of it is what I said before, having patience as well, and trying to really understand this person, because you believe me, you just do not want to rush into it, like, not at all.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. But I think from a man's perspective, it's easier for you to even say that, not to rush. Okay. Because you guys can actually, have relationships at quite an elderly age. And we have to be realistic as women as well. So there is that factor. But I do understand, and I do take on board what you're saying, because I think a lot of women generally, I also coach a lot, and they do feel that, their biological clock is running out. Plus, in the Muslim community, they are judged, and the first question is asked is, are you married? And if you're not, you're actually not deemed to be of a certain caliber or things like that. So men do get away a lot. So you're quite lucky in that sense. So I do feel that unfortunately it's quite it's like a double standard, but it for some reasons I can understand too. But I think that when it comes to relationships, I think when it comes to Muslims and the Western world, as much as we don't really adhere to the Western culture, but I do feel there's certain things that we can take away from the Western culture is learning about yourself, knowing yourself, and like you said, not to rush, because when you rush, then you're obviously not going to sort of be aware of the red flags. You're not going to see certain things that you need to see. Now, in the Muslim culture, we do have a lot of family involvement in the marriage, in the process of relationships, even getting to the point where we have to, and a lot of the times, get the permission. Whereas in the West, it's not necessarily like that, even though it might be in certain cultures. But how do you stand with that? And now you moving sort of more towards obviously the Islamic sort of way, what is the sort of like, the real differences about getting family involved? Do you think that's more pressure, or do you think that's more opinions that, that maybe can help you see things that you wouldn't normally see? What's your sort of thoughts on that?
I think it obviously all depends on the person and their family. You're gonna have families that are obviously, more difficult to deal with, and then you're gonna have families who are very, accepting. I think part of that process is getting to know the person, getting to know who their family are, and ultimately deciding if that's something that you feel like you can handle. I think I'm a family person. I like my family is my life. My brother, my parents, and they're going to be involved in everything that I'm doing. And because I know how their character is, because some people want their families to be involved, but they understand that their families are not as accepting. So I understand, but me, I view it like that your family should be involved, but it's I understand when people have a pushback towards it, because they know how their family is. They know there's gonna be pushback. They know that they're gonna fight it. They know that their family's against the person who they're marrying. So there's kind of like it's a hard thing to balance for most people. I just think it all depends on the person and their families.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, of course, it is about each one's values. And I think in certain parts of the world, regardless if it's the West or not, family really does matter, and regardless of that. But do you see also there's some cultural practices amongst Muslims, which is not necessarily religious, and especially like the born Muslims from overseas being different from the born Muslims in the West? What do you see that? Do you think that they're adapting and trying to be more Western because they are in the West? And do you see that as such a shame? Because at the end of the day, they should obviously embrace who they are. But what do you see is, why do you see that as them finding it a challenge, especially from your point of view, an outsider who's actually coming into the faith? Because maybe something that, some of us can learn from.
Absolutely. It's like I said, I understand, because I know a lot of Muslims here in the West that live, the Western lifestyle, the Western culture, which, in many ways contradicts, the Islamic faith. And I get why it happens, but what people have to realize that, and especially me, I'm a revert. I come from a total different culture. Culture and religion does not mix. They just don't. And Islam is and this is one of the reasons why I joined. It's very straightforward. It's very black and white. This is what you're supposed to be doing. These things are prohibited, and I get it. Outside influences. It's very hard. It's very hard. It's challenging. Being on the West and being Muslim. It is, because the Western media, the Western culture is growing so much, and a lot of it contradicts everything that we believe in. So I understand that aspect. I really, really do. But what people have to understand is that culture and religion don't necessarily mix 100%. So we have to find that fine line, and do our best. That's the key, just to do our best.
I think what you said is really important, because I have heard from a lot of reverts in the past saying, especially women, that you know, when they come into the faith, if they're not fully aware, they can be really duped into believing certain things, which is cultural and it's not religious. And they can, you know, really be sort of like put into awkward and really difficult situations because they are forced or sort of like, you know, falsely that they have to do certain things, but it's nothing to do with the religion at all. It's more to do with the culture. So I think it's really important, from what I'm hearing as well, is that you need to go out and search and do that sort of like, you know, information research about your faith yourself before you actually enter into a marriage, so that you know what is the culture and what is the religion, and you're going to be smarter to understand, especially as women as well, that if they are told to do certain things, not to do certain things, that you know that it's in line with faith other than culture. And it's gone so quickly where we are coming into our second break, but please do stay with us. We will be back shortly after a few moments, and we'll be having and continuing our conversation with our lovely guest Andre tonight, all the way from Argentina. Please make sure you do stay tuned, send in any questions and comments, and I look forward to seeing you in a few seconds. Take care. Salam. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We're here again talking to Andre. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. If you've missed anything, please rewind, go back, take note, because there's some really good gems and some real good insights for all of us to learn and listen, especially in the Muslim community, where we need to understand that our faith is for everyone. But when an outsider does come into our faith and our religion, we need to understand what that journey may be. And there's no judgment, there's more compassion and understanding. But at the same time, in our Muslim community, again, I'm going to be the one to say it, we are quite segregated with regards to our backgrounds and cultures, especially when it comes to getting married. And there is some sort of sense of marrying your own background and culture in the Muslim community. So now, where does that mean, and what does that mean for reverts? Do they only need to only marry someone who's a revert? No, absolutely not, because that's not what our faith states. But are we open to that? I don't really think so, unfortunately. So you tell me, Andre, where do you stand and sit with relationships? Because at the end of the day, yes, you know, people will welcome you, they'll love you for being part of the Muslim community. You're my brother, you know, you're like this, like that, and the other. But when it comes for marriage, they can be even more judgmental as to your background, where you come from. And you know what? I'm definitely going to say it out loud, even if you're not going to, but I'm going to say it. And at the same time, I want you to give me your honest opinion. I mean, it's a challenge, right? It's a real challenge, and it's a real shame, because again, this is not representative of our faith.
Absolutely. I mean, it happens. It does. I've gotten the judge. Like I said, I get judged all the time, but I've seen, I've had friends, reverts trying to get married, and they do get judged. They absolutely do. It happens, unfortunately. You'll be viewed as, for example, because I know another Latino revert, and their families, the families of the women, born Muslim, and they'll view him as less, as under because he's a revert, because of the background that he comes from. So, there's a little bit of everything in it. There's a little bit of racism. There's a little bit of just a lot of judgmental. Like it really just falls into that, and it's hard. It's hard because again, it's also mixing in the culture, because they want their culture to be with their culture, which is obviously not representative of Islam. That completely goes against Islam. And the reality is more and more people are converting every single day. And if you really want to embrace someone as your brother or your sister in Islam, you have to accept them just all around. You can't accept them and then view them as under you in certain aspects. And even in knowledge, like I've seen, and it's happened to me, where there's born Muslims who I try to correct, in a sense that like I know a certain information and I'm trying to tell them about it, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're a revert. What do you know?" Like it happens all the time. You know what I mean? So again, I don't take it that personal at all, because I understand how people are. I understand that people are going to judge you no matter what. But I do see it happen all the time, and there's a lot of people who want to just marry their own culture and stick with their own culture in Islam too. So it's crazy.
Yeah, again, you're very polite. I just think it's completely wrong if anyone does that, to be honest, and have those kind of like judgments against anyone, and also judging someone's past as well. We do find that we have that a lot, unfortunately. And Muslims, born Muslims, are not innocent. We all have skeletons in our closets, and I know that for a fact. So we cannot be judging anyone from the outside. And I do feel that there is a lot of pressure on you, especially not you personally, but generally for people that have come into the faith to practice 100%. When we know that a lot of Muslims that are born don't even do that. But as soon as you come into the faith, then it's like, oh, but are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you fasting? Are you, praying? And I know so many times that, we have taken a whole lifetime to get there, growing up as children and developing over time, building this habit, which takes years and years and months, and even if you fall and fail. And you even mentioned as well in our previous conversation about reprogramming that mindset of not just coming into the faith, but of the Muslim community reprogramming their way of looking and understanding of someone coming into the faith. Now, what sort of advice would you give Muslims? Because at the end of the day, we need to learn more, and I want to learn from you.
Um, yeah, it's like I said, it's definitely reprogramming on both ends. It's reprogramming my own mindset and understanding what I'm getting into, what I'm learning about. And it's on the other end as well, understanding that we don't have that same background, we don't have the same culture, we don't have the same anything. We're two total polar opposites, but our common ground is Islam. And that should stay like that. Regardless, from me coming from a different background, you should just understand that, I may not
Andre,
understand
I'm going to
everything.
ask you to go much more in depth into that question as we are coming to our break. And inshallah, we will be back and we will continue with much more insight question because I think we need a lot more time. So we are going to be coming up to a short break. Please do join us as we are going to divulge much more deeper as I've got warmed up, and now we're going to go a lot more deeper. We'll see you soon. Take care. Salam. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Again, we are discussing revert, mixed culture, and background challenges. Now, this is even amongst the Muslim community, as I discussed before, where we are very segregated when it comes to relationships. And we will welcome a revert and, call them brother and, or sister and invite them into our homes. But when it comes to marriage, there is a lot more judgment. There's a lot more to consider, understandably, on some instances, but Islamically, that is not what we should practice. We have problems even within our Muslim communities when we are born Muslims with regards to who we choose to marry. And we need to open up our mindset with regards to relationships. What is the biggest difference with the Latino culture and the Muslim culture when it comes to women's roles? And do you think that it's quite similar? I mean, now obviously with feminism in the Western world, it's like 50-50 and all of that. And, where does it stand from where you're coming from? And is there similarities with the Muslim sort of culture and faith compared to the Latino?
Well, I think it's definitely similar to what I said earlier. As far as the older generations understanding, um, on women's roles is very, very similar to what Islam teaches, and I saw those similarities again in the older generation. But with Western media and the way everything is going in the West right now, like you said, with feminism, it changed completely now. So there's a different outlook on it. So now they're becoming two polar opposites, especially with my generation. It's 50-50, or we don't need the men, we don't want the men. It's gotten to that point now. So right now it's like that. But I think, like I said, in the earlier generations, because there was a lot of they were very religious, especially back in the day. They have way more similarities with Islam as far as the woman being the nurturer, and it's very, very similar in that aspect. But now, because of Western media, it changed completely. It's polar opposites.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can understand that. Now, when it comes to also Muslim representation, Now, a lot of Westerners don't really get the right representation, obviously for social media, for main reasons. But now, obviously, with social media, it's also open with different platforms and streaming. But then even that, you don't get the real sort of like representation of the faith, because you can still get the extremes. You still can get, certain opinions and judgments of how Muslims are. Now, what would you like to see? Because what have you seen? Because obviously, someone like yourself, you've gone through the academic route and the intellectual route of researching and looking yourself. But I've also come across reverts that may have done that when they come into this actual Muslim community. Unfortunately, some of them have been disappointed because there isn't real representation of the actual faith itself. And it's quite disappointing. And a lot of them also find that they don't feel like they're even part of that community, for example, or they don't feel that, it's been adhered to with regards to the actual practices. So what is your thoughts on, Muslim representation in its community itself? I mean, of course, we're human, we're not here to be perfect, but at the same time, what did you experience when it comes to Muslim representation in the community?
So, early on, obviously, I knew almost nothing. I've heard all of the bad press that Islam had. Of course, especially me living, in the United States after 9/11, Islam got a lot of bad press. We live in a day and age now that, like you said, that you can actually research, and that's what I did. We live in a day and age where you can, look yourself and find information yourself. And the representation, I would say, definitely changed because of how open everything is right now. That information is everywhere. It's different though, I would say, in South America. In South America here, because there's not that many Muslims as in the U.S., for example, their knowledge is basically what my knowledge was when I was a kid. Like, there's no representation out here, and this is considered the West. South America is considered Western culture as well. So I would say in South America, there's almost very little to no representation at all. And inshallah, that's one of the things that I want to bring, to because me being I'm half Argentine, I want to bring representation down here. I want to bring representation to Ecuador. I want to make the people aware, because in the U.S. has a lot of representation. It does, even with bad press, even with all of the things that go against it. There is a very open mind about Islam now, I would say. But this part of the world still hasn't had that, and we're considered on the West right now. So I want to bring that representation down here, because they have little to none. If we think there's not a lot in the United States or in Canada, there's really not a lot down here. So that's something I would, inshallah, like to bring down here one day.
Yeah, no, that's true. We do need to be a little bit more aware. And I think now with social media, people are obviously, even with the lack of mainstream media representation of the reality, I think people are aware of, what's going on and some sort of agenda in certain sort of instances. But again, do you find that even Muslims are strong enough to even represent themselves? And, did you come across any influencers or scholars or just people in general that you felt that, what, that really represents and we need more of that? And at the end of the day, because we want to know, because having an sort of like an exterior, an external lens is what we need to sort of learn from. And you are the perfect sort of model for that, because we are in our own little bubble a lot of the times as well, and we don't see it, and we think that, yeah, we've got the mosques and we've got the imams and we've got the scholars, but it is social media that is the real influence. Do you think there's real representation, forget also mainstream, but actually in the sort of like social media? Because that's where people are really influenced today, especially the youngsters. Someone like yourself, mature, maybe understand what happens behind closed doors and the scenes that you see. But social media can also be quite detrimental for Muslims trying to represent themselves, and it's not necessarily done in that way. So what do you see in social media today about Muslims, and how do you see it as a representation of the reality of the faith?
I can definitely speak for myself. I think it's been extremely helpful. The amount of things I've learned or I've looked up myself through social media is like, I would say that like the majority of the things, and I would include YouTube into that, because YouTube, it's just so quick. You can search a video about Islam in 2 seconds. And I started learning, I started watching a lot of lectures, a lot of debates, a lot of the And what people don't understand is that, there's people who are qualified to speak on certain aspects of Islam, because Islam is so broad and there's so many different avenues when you really, really, dig deep into it. Jurisprudence. There's so much different avenues for you to learn about. And I started learning, everyone. I started learning people who give dawah, and people who are qualified. And there's so much representation right now in social media. I think it's the best time to take advantage and really look into it. Of course, you're going to have the other side. You're going to have the other side that speaks out against it. But I think that's where you have to be objective and really look into it. And then you're going to come to your own conclusion, because after I converted, I started seeing videos of people who are against Islam, Islamophobes, people from other faiths, and they try to come against it, and they try to say certain things that I had to look up, and I had to try to counter that. And I found that through social media. I found those answers through social media. So I would definitely say it's been extremely, extremely helpful. And I would say positive, more on the positive end than the negative end for Islam.
Absolutely. What more would you like to see from the community with regards to support and understanding, especially for reverts? And what do you think is lacking that can come, not just in social media, but just the communities, the homes, the people generally? I mean, even when you go into your local mosque and communities, even if you've got a good experience, I'm sure you hear of the negative. So I want to highlight that more importantly, because the only way we're going to improve is to understand what is lacking so that we can fill those gaps and build those bridges. So what would be some of the things that you can advise the Muslim community, even in the speeches, even in the sort of like you going into Friday prayer and some of the lectures? Is it relevant and practical to everyone in different communities, or do you think they're just talking to their own community, the Arabs to the Arabs and, the Pakistanis to the Pakistanis? Where would you fit in, for example? Or do you think it should be a little bit more different? How is that with you?
It's definitely, like I said before, it's understanding that a different culture. Islam is not about culture. Islam is about humanity. It's about everyone. It's about every single culture coming together. So when if a sheikh is going to give, or the imam is going to give a lecture, understanding that this is for everyone. It's not just for one group of people. And you're going to have people that come from different backgrounds, that come from different walks of life, that come from different experiences, that may have done a lot of things that went against Islam and are trying to better themselves. So you have to have the understanding when you're speaking out to someone, and you're trying to grasp them, you're trying to relate to them, and you have to understand that you're getting people from all walks of life. I've had experiences where I went into masjids where I really didn't feel like a part of it, and then I've had experience in masjids where and they've been older imams, younger imams, and they've related to me 100%, and I understood them, and everything went well. So it just a matter of understanding, and really getting down to the fundamental of Islam, which is it's for humanity. It's not for a culture. It's not for a part of the world. It's for the entire world. It's for all of humanity. And that's the most important thing. Once you understand that, you'll be able to relate to everyone. Because like I said, culture and religion don't mix. Our religion is very straightforward, and there's certain things we do, there's certain things we don't do. And you have to understand that if a person from a different culture who basically did everything against Islam at one point, you have to bring them closer to and understand the reasons why and try to bring them closer. It's all through understanding. It's all through patience.
Absolutely. I really do admire everything that you say and how your lens and viewpoint is. I think your perspective is really healthy and it shows how your mindset works. But what has been the most challenging experience so far to date that you can remember? And I know you're still on a journey, but when it comes to reverting to Islam, and how is it for you personally that you took on that challenge, and are you still going through it, or what was it that helped it? So what was your most challenging moment?
I think I've had a bunch of different challenging moments that kept on changing. It's like at first, just as the simple, the task. I wouldn't say simple, but praying 5 times a day was the first one. I'm like, wow, like, how am I really gonna pray 5 times a day? I saw it as impossible before. You know what I mean? And now it's part of my everyday life. So every day something is changing. You know what I mean? Every day it's a constant change for me. Like I said, I wouldn't say I had one huge, obstacle for me. It's every day was something different. Learning then came learning, the Arabic, learning how to pray, that alone was like, all right, now I got to pray 5 times a day. How am I supposed to learn this? I'm never going to learn this. And now I've learned so many suttas already. So it's all a matter of putting your mind to it and just wanting to learn, wanting to learn the process, wanting to gain knowledge every single day. I think that alone is I would say that alone is the biggest obstacle. Learning something new about the religion every day, and even the most experienced, imams, the most experienced, scholars, they're always learning. They're also always learning. So we, the normal people, quote unquote, are also learners as well. So we have to. That's the obstacle. That's the biggest obstacle: learning and applying it. Learning and applying it. We all fall short. Everyone does, but it's to learn from it and keep moving forward.
Again, another very wise sort of response from yourself, Andre. Now, when it comes to relationships for yourself, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, because it is personal, but you personally, are you kind of wary, fearful about getting into a relationship? Because I know you're single right now. Would it be someone that would be a revert in your eyes, or would it be someone who is born Muslim? How does that sit with you? What do you feel like when it comes to family and children? Because I know it's obviously different for everybody, but it's just interesting to know, like, at this point in your life where you are, and obviously still continuing to go on this journey. What's your thoughts about relationships for yourself?
Absolutely. It's, I would love, inshallah, one day, to have a family. I would love to have, children. I'd love to have wife. And like I said, since I did come from a different background of, dating, thinking that that's normal and having that experience, I wouldn't say that I'm actively looking for a wife right now. Like, okay, like I'm here, I'm taking applications now, like I'm trying to find a wife. But if it does happen, it happens, and then we move forward from there. But I wouldn't say that I'm actively looking for one, right now. I would say I'm focusing on myself right now, on what I'm doing, and if that's what comes along with it, perfect. Inshallah, that can happen one day, but I'm not gonna say that I'm actively out here looking for it, like every day.
What would be your advice to somebody who is coming to the religion? A lot of people do come into the religion because they found a Muslim, whether it's a man or a woman, right? And I mean, there's nothing wrong in that, fair enough. But then you still have to learn about the faith, I always say, because you don't want to just be in that religion or be in that faith because of that relationship. So, what would be the advice to a revert who is coming to the religion, and obviously, they're single and they're looking to get married? What would be the first steps that you would advise them to take before even entering into a relationship?
I would definitely, tell them to, of course, take their time. Now, differentiating, like, just do whatever you want. No, I'm saying take your time, learn, take the time to understand why you're taking the steps that you're taking, whatever step it is, whether it's praying 5 times a day. Why are we praying 5 times a day? If it's you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to have alcohol. Why are you not allowed to have alcohol? Everything, understand the why behind it, which there is an answer to every single thing. One of the reasons why I joined, or why I got into this religion. There's a reason for every single thing, for every single rule, for every single principle that we follow. There's a reason behind it. So understand the why, and then it's gonna make everything so much easier. It was easier for me to pray 5 times a day once I understood why we pray 5 times a day. There's so much reason behind it, and that's just like the simple example that I can give. Understand the why for every single aspect of Islam. Understand the why. Go and seek the knowledge. Go speak to the people who have the knowledge, and you'll understand, and it's going to make the journey way easier.
Absolutely. I love that advice. We are coming to the end of the show, but before we do end, I just want to make sure that you send out your information, as a lot of people may want to follow you and, know what you're doing, learn more about you. How does anybody reach you, Andre?
I'm available on Instagram, on TikTok. My @ name is Andre M. Murillo on TikTok and on Instagram. So you can follow me there. You can DM me any questions that anyone has. I get a lot of reverts that reach out to me. A lot of born Muslims as well, just wanting to know my story. I actually posted my story, and it got a lot of views on TikTok, on why I reverted. So any questions anyone has, any help that anyone needs, just reach out to me, and I can help you out.
Excellent. No, we definitely need that. And please, if you're ever making a trip to the UK, make sure you stay in touch. We need young minds, young voices, inspirational minds and voices. And you certainly do represent that. And I'm so grateful to have you tonight, giving us your time and especially your wise insights. I think it's so important. And you've been completely transparent and open and very kind as well, even though I've kind of challenged that about the Muslim community. But no, honestly, I know everyone's experience is very different. And there's some wonderful Muslims out there who are very welcoming and open, and there's lots of groups and supports. But before we end, we've got a couple of minutes. Any final thoughts before we end the show on anything that you want to say before we end regards, culture, religion, faith? What you've got about just under a minute.
Yeah, just like I said, have understanding, everyone, have understanding. And as far as the relationships, I know we view it differently coming from a different background, but it's like you said, there is a double standard with men and women. Just truly, be sure about the person you're going to marry on both ends. Try to be sure, you know what I mean? And I understand there's a time limit, for especially for the women, but just try to be sure and don't feel like it's going to be the end of the world if you don't marry this person. Understand, have patience, and you'll be fine.
Amazing. Absolutely wonderful. It's been so inspiring, so enlightening to hear you speak tonight. Again, I want to thank you, Andre, for being with us tonight. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you as my guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for watching, everyone, as well. We've had such an amazing guest tonight, and it's been so, sort of like inspiring to hear him speak. Please do follow him. And inshallah, we also want to thank you for watching. We want to thank Andre for being with us tonight. Please join us next week, same time, same place. We do listen to your voices, so please send in your messages. And inshallah, we will be back with another topic and episode. I want to wish you all a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.